at you personally, but secondly, you've got whole teams of civil servants behind you.
Well, not behind me, actually.
Behind,
I wish I did.
Behind the government of which you're now representative. So congratulations for that. But when you write to them with the arguments, how they completely dismiss the growing body of evidence around the world. This is not about my ego or somebody else's ego. This is about real concerns and so much evidence.
Absolutely right.
So much flying in the face of European directives, and they're saying no.
But what's quite interesting here actually is the fact that no one's having a go at Europe. It's a great change for me not to have people shouting at me that Europe's done something wrong. You see, we supported European rules, and also it's quite interesting we're actually clapping Sinn Féin, which I never thought I'd see in English. Against extraordinary. But you're quite right. But I think that's one of the reasons why we as Liberal Democrats supported getting rid of moving back the decisions to local councils. And that's just a great shame in this instance you're describing. And the whole point was, I think, about the PHA move on existing things, was that if there's fluoridation already in place, someone has to manage it. So, in the West Midlands, for instance. So, that's what that was about. And the idea was that local councils, we all thought, right, local councils are going to make the decision, local councils are going to say no, problem solved. Yeah, that's what we all thought, I think, wasn't it? It turns out there's some very odd thinking going on here. So when you're complaining about democracy, we're trying to put democracy in place, and that's what we've done. The fact that for some reason it's not working is what we need to look into. That's why I'm saying it's very, very important that we take it seriously and look into why, in this instance, if the PHA are actually going to say it's in place, I quite agree with you. You need to look into that. I totally agree with you.
If the issue comes up in Parliament in the future, how will you vote then?
Well, I don't think the issue needs to come up in Parliament. I think it's quite clear.
Well,
It has to.
It has to.
I will vote completely and utterly for local democracy, which is what the intention was. I would not vote. This shouldn't be a national decision. It should be the local council decision. But it is.
Hold on.
No, it should be up to local people to make a decision about their own water. I don't think I should make a decision about what Yorkshire people want to do.
No, it shouldn't be in the water to start with. You've got freedom of choice by taking it in fluoride tablets, fluoride gels,
So I don't quite understand what you're saying. You're saying that you shouldn't have local decision on it?
The campaign...
You should not have fluoridation at full stop.
Well, I think it's up to local people to decide what they want to do.
No, people who want fluoride can take it without infringing the rights of others.
So I think it should be up to local people to make a decision. That's my point of view.
No, you haven't got the right
so
to
that's my point of view, and that's your point of view, sir. My point of view is local people should make the decision. Local people have decided they don't want fluoride in the water, so there shouldn't be fluoride in the water.
We shouldn't have legislation on the statute book.
Can we move on to the next one before this one sort of gets out of hand? Because the lady in...
Also my local MP,
Yeah.
and I have written to you about the subject.
Yeah.
The situation as it stands is that the Strategic Health Society is spending £750,000.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we voted against it, yeah.
The situation as I understand it now is that now Hampshire County Council have to implement the scheme. They have to have yet another referendum. My point is twofold. One, how many times do we have to say no? Right, and the second part of my question is this. The Strategic Health Society very cynically were given exemption from prosecution, for damage to public health.
Right.
Now, the local water authorities were against this scheme until the 1990s, until the government gave them exemption from prosecution. I would like to know if Hampshire County councillors are also being given exemption.
I don't know. I don't, no idea.
Could you please, as my MP, I would like to on this, find out. Two questions I'm asking.
Yeah.
Can you answer both of them for me? How many times do we have to say no?
I don't know the legislation on that. I think it's pretty obvious that people don't want it and they shouldn't have to have it. That's my answer to that. The complications around, you probably know a lot more about that than I do, because I'm a bit like, an MP is a bit like a GP. They have a superficial knowledge of a lot of things, rather than like a consultant who knows a lot about, say, cancer. Now, a lot of you probably know a lot more about this issue than I do. The whole point coming, I was invited to come here by yourself. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I come here to listen and to hear what people have to say. At the moment, What I'm saying is that it should be a democratic decision, and people should be able to make their own decisions about it.
But we had
Can I just make one?
That's my thing. I don't quite understand why you're having a go for believing in democracy. I'm sorry.
Can I just make one simple point, please? Can I just make one simple point?
Sure.
We don't know it's not working.
If the legislation remains on the statute book,
Yeah.
and you have a community decide
Yeah.
by a vote, could be a referendum, whether they want fluoridation or not.
Yeah.
You could have a situation where 51% decide they do and 49% say they don't. You could effectively have one half of the population forcing the other half to consume this when they don't want it.
Yeah.
That's what's wrong with it. That's why there needs to be a debate in our parliament to decide whether we should continue with this. And how would you vote? Would you vote to stop it? Would you vote to repeal the legislation?
I would not vote for any enforced fluoridisation. No, I don't think it's right.
So you vote for a repeal?
I don't think we should put fluoride in water. I don't think we should. I don't think we should put anything in water that shouldn't be there
naturally. Would you vote for
naturally.
repeal of the legislation?
If it came up, probably would. But I can't promise you now what I don't know. I've told you quite clearly that I don't know enough about the subject to promise you about something now. I'm not being a politician here.
But you know
I
about the
don't
principle?
know. The principle, my principle is I don't think you should put it in water, because I don't think you should add anything to water, because that's enforced, making people take something they shouldn't have to take. Someone said to me it's the same as vitamin D in bread. It's not vitamin D in bread, because some bread has vitamin D and some doesn't. So you've got a choice.
It's
You haven't got a choice.
essential nutrient.
Shouldn't
Fluoride
Can I
isn't.
make a point
But
that
if-
I've been trying to make for quite a
Yeah,
while,
sure.
and it's this. You say that if people don't want fluoride in the water, they shouldn't have it, right? Okay, I don't want fluoride in my water, but this gentleman here might. Now, no, he won't, but you see what I mean? It is not a democratic principle that we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the people's individual consent not to have medication, and you can't do that by a majority vote. If I was in my street where I live, okay, and I decided that what would be a very nice idea would be if they were to put into the water a drug, shall we say, gin. if they were put into the water something that would prevent obesity, okay?
Right.
But half of the people in there say, well, hang on, I know that a lot of people are obese, but I'm not. Are you going to force me
That's a
to
good
have
point.
medication through my water to prevent me from getting fat when I'm not fat? No, you wouldn't accept it. You wouldn't accept it, neither would I. Why have we got to take a majority vote on something when it should be an individual matter of consent?
I think that's a very, very well put point. I think I might have to reconsider my
What you're
position.
not considering is multinational companies outside this country having persuading the pro vote.
I've just said I'm reconsidering my
Outside
position.
this country.
That's right, I just said I was reconsidering my position.
Democracy. Outside
I'm sorry, I just said I'm reconsidering my position. That lady there, before you talked, has put an incredibly good point, and I'm reconsidering. Sorry, I've just said I'm reconsidering my position because that lady put a very good point, and I'm thinking about changing my mind. How's that? You know.
What's the next one? You've been waiting patiently for and I've got one at the end then.
Sure.
My MP was in on this from the start, Julian Lewis.
Yeah.
Can you tell me that you'll work with Julian?
I'll work with anyone. Certainly.
Can you, with Julian, put something through Parliament to say they've got to go to Europe again?
Well, the only way I could do that would have to be a private member's bill, and I'm not on the ballot for that at the moment, so I'd have to wait. But I think the main thing on this to do is that I think this is what's very interesting about the Irish thing is that if the evidence that they're bringing up is correct, and I haven't had a chance to look at it properly, so if they win a High Court case, that comes across here. Now, the other side of this is, and this is quite wonderful to be in front of a group of people who actually are applauding Europe instead of having a go at it, is that I think that that's the other case to put is very much the MEP group. And by the MEP that I know particularly well, which is Catherine Bearder, I was very happy to write to her about this get her
Daniel
support.
Hannon as well.
Yeah, okay. But the one I know well, it's always best to work with somebody you know well, and then get her to talk to other people. Is I'm very happy to talk to Catherine Beard. It'd be very interesting to have your evidence for me to write to her with it and see how. Well, actually, I might just talk. I'll probably just phone her.
Is this to do with this?
Yes.
Just a
hello.
quick-
I didn't actually come here realising I was going to be answering questions on this. Otherwise, I would have got prepared, better prepared to answer questions. At the moment, you're throwing things at me, and I'm literally making it up as I go along. So, if you
I'm Anna
understand.
Peckham. I invited you, and
Yes,
so
thank you.
very grateful you're here. I did actually contact Catherine Beard a number of years ago, but she never got back to me on this
Well,
issue of
Well, I'll
fluoridation.
contact her as well.
Okay, if you
and
would.
see what she has
She
to
just
say.
kept sending me her sort of
Standard,
regular
yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
but nothing.
Give the lady at the back there who's been waiting a little while with a white sweater. Yes.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you. Well, actually, I think didn't we hear that actually I remember from the slide. Could you put that slide up? I thought that the UK had about the lowest rate of dental caries in Europe on that slide. So I think actually we're probably doing a very good job here, and we could do better. But it looks like we're actually doing a very good job, which I think is one of the arguments you've got to say, why actually do something? If 75% of people in this country had rotten teeth, you might say we need something to do something about it. But I think with 5% of, is it 5% for the UK?
Here, it's just the UK is here. This is the
So we are.
missing and filled teeth. The DMFT is decayed missing and filled teeth.
It's interesting why Cyprus is at lowest, isn't it? Is that right? Am I getting the right thing? Is it the red thing that's bad and the blue thing that's good? Is that right?
No, the blue was between 1980 and 1990, 2000.
So there's been a massive improvement. A massive improvement. So obviously, I think it kind of defeats the whole point, is what you were saying, for having it in the first place. Sorry. Yeah.
One more. Sorry.
Sorry. Did you want to?
So one more question, Adrian. Do you want to say?
Adrian?
I think one of the things that hasn't been mentioned here is that we have a catch-22 situation.
Right.
That's very convincing. Southampton City Council
Yeah.
and Democrats. We, on a motion that I put forward, persuaded the City Council to change its position from supporting to opposing fluoride.
You did indeed, yeah.
There's been an election since then, and I couldn't swear what the vote would be if we did it again tomorrow.
No, but you won at the time.
That is the official position of the City Council. However, when the government moved responsibility from the Strategic Health Authority to local councils, what I understand it said is that any new scheme was the responsibility of the local council.
Yes.
An existing scheme, i.e. the SHA scheme, was not, however, repealed.
That's right. That's what.
So unfortunately, this does, I think, need to come back to Parliament, and Parliament needs to go that step further, that gives local councils the power to abandon schemes that SHA's previously.
Adrian, can I just very quickly say then, sorry, and then I'll shut up. I'm very happy to actually raise this as a question in Parliament, in Prime Minister's question time. I cannot promise you I will be able to ask, because you have to keep bobbing up and down. Teacher, I want to speak, like that. It's a bit sad, but that's how it works. But I will certainly make that one of the questions I definitely want to ask, and I'll try and get in there on Wednesday. It's too late for me to put a written question now for Wednesday, but if I bob up and down enough, I might be able to get something in there. Yes, I think the speaker would chuck me out if I had talked to him.
I think we've got to sort of concentrate more on Ashley as well. But one thing on what you said there, Adrian, was two things. One is that we're trying to say it's not an existing scheme because it's not in place and nothing has been sorted out.
They're saying it is, though.
They're saying that
that's what I'd ask the question about.
Yeah. But the thing is, there are arrangements being put in place for removing it, so the councils can remove it. But if they have a consultation and they decide not to remove it, you can't reconsider it for another 20 years.
Yeah, can I just, just to clarify on particularly for Adrian, one of the problems is you do have the power, the City Council has the power to terminate a scheme if it exists. We don't think it exists. And another good way of thinking about that, if you want to terminate the current scheme that exists, you have to give the details of what it is you're terminating to public consultation. So if you can tell me what it is that you're terminating, then you can do a termination. If you can't, then surely there is no scheme. Public Health England should not be working on this. Absolutely. But you do have the power to stop it.
Any more questions, particularly? Yeah.
Yes, hi. On the issue of consent, as you know, I'm from West Midlands Fluoridation. We've got a postcard campaign going at the moment where we're writing to the CEO of the NHS. That's right, yes. We've got a large quantity of postcards, and we'd love for everybody in here who's convinced about the damaging caused to health in the field to fill them in, and let us take them in and send them off direct to the NHS. So my colleagues are sitting at the back of the room and outside, ready to, hopefully, you'll fill them in before you go and give them back to us immediately. These are to the CEO of the NHS. We refuse our consent under the NHS Constitution and under the European Convention of Human Rights and Biomedicine. And that we are fully informed and we are in our right minds, we're not mad. So we have the right as individuals. And this is another way of tackling it. The more we send to him, he can't refuse to accept them because they're going by recorded delivery. They're being counted and they're being photocopied, so we have proof that they're going in. So please, everybody who hasn't signed postcards up until now, please do it now before you go. That'd be really good. Thank you.
Can I make a point, Joy?
Yes.
We did a postcard campaign, and the dirty trick is that you send in all your postcards that are printed with that message on. Unless you put your own individual little remark on there, they will be counted as one.
How do they have the right to do that? What law says they can do it?
They don't behave according to the law. They obey.
I think one of the reasons for that too is because there have been written things in the past where one person has sent 100 cards in.
Yes.
And things like that. So it's trying to defend against when one person will try and distort the view, and it may be something that actually we think is quite wrong, and you might think it's quite wrong in this room. If someone sends in 1,000 cards themselves to try and look like there's more support than there is, it's not really a very good thing to do.
I have to actually check every single one for validity and make sure that they're dated and all the signatures are completely different with all the addresses, different handwriting and everything.
I don't know why the extra handwriting on it, but perhaps it's just one extra thing, I don't know.
Just one thing I would just say to you is, as my MP, is I really appreciate the fact you're coming here today. You've only just come into office, and I'm sorry if you get quite a few brickbats, but there's a lot of frustration.
My own fault, isn't it, for standing?
No. So thank you for that. But one thing I would ask you to, as my MP, is to look at the fact that people have been just ridden roughshod over when they've made very valid points about the evidence there, the fact that there's so many questions about where water's going to be diverted, whether it's going to be in unauthorised areas or areas that haven't been asked for their opinion, and just to look at the facts in a bit more detail. If you, the answer that no reasonable person could honestly turn and say that this is a fair scheme for anybody, because there are too many holes in the arguments, and I would just ask you to please look at the facts.
I think the answer is what you said, is that perhaps 50 years ago, the fact, the thoughts was fluoride was safe. I mean, they've been doing it in Chicago for years, I believe, that sort of thing, and they probably thought it was a safe thing. Yeah. And once someone's gone to mind that's the right thing to do, people who oppose something like that often come across as cranks, unfortunately. And that's it. And because there aren't, I tell you, I've had a lot of communications recently about the fact that actually an alien has thrown an asteroid at us and we're about to be destroyed, and it's going to happen, I think, on Sunday. Now, the problem is if I spent a lot of time, and I think, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, please don't think that I think that you're in any of that, I don't mean that at all, but that's one of the reasons why sometimes at early stages of any campaign, you probably found that in Ireland, is people saying, here's another crank course, I haven't got time to deal with this, I've got a farmer who needs this, I've got a business falling apart in my constituency, I've got people who aren't getting operations on, I'm going to concentrate on this. And it's not until it starts to go and starts to move and people start getting convinced, and that actually people start to listen. because it needs more than just a few people. And this is what happens as it gets going, and obviously stripping down, which is obviously a rather wonderful thing for you to do. I don't know if it's sexist for me to say you can come do that in my constituency anytime. Yeah, so it's just the way life is. I mean, life isn't fair, life is and in a democracy, things take a long time and don't go. It'd be wonderful if, you know, I could snap my fingers and do something, and you can't. So I'll just say you're quite right, but this is just the way things happen, and it probably is always going to happen that way. And when they find something else in the future that's really wrong, it'll take people determined, like you guys, before anything gets going. It's just life. Sorry.
One thing, as soon as you start opposing the government, you're immediately marginalised by people like the BBC, at the moment. And they sort of say you're a sort of crazy minority. But we must remember, actually 98% of Europe, mainland Europe, is the same opinion as us.
Yes.
They've looked at the evidence, they've done trials, and they've decided to stop fluoridation. And they said it's wrong, and they don't do it. So we are actually in the majority scientific and moral position.
And at the moment, the majority of the kingdom doesn't have fluoride in water, so just keep fighting.
But was that as locally or as a government? As so, like Germany stopped fluoridation. It wasn't some principality in Germany that stopped fluoridation. It was the German government, or it was the Belgium, or whatever.
Well,
I don't believe we should be even discussing this issue here. It should be in Parliament.
Well, you have to discuss the issue here before people can discuss it in Parliament.
It's a parliamentary issue.
Just a quick point here. This whole issue of Public Health England saying this is an existing scheme, clearly we know it's not an existing scheme. What are the politicians specifically going to do to back us up, because they take our taxpayer money and they use it against us? We go around with a bucket collecting pennies to oppose them. It's like Goliath, against us, David versus Goliath. Give us some specifics. I mean, we're very good of you to come here. I mean, you're a decent chap to brave the crowd, I mean, not MPs turn up. But we really need more specifics. I mean...
Well, I can't give you specifics. All I can say is that...
How can we be helped in this?
Well, I said the next thing I can do is ask in Parliament, Prime Minister's question time. That is the first thing to bring it up to the attention. It's unfortunate that the other slight difficulties, of course, is that my constituency, actually, I think it's only about that much of it is affected by the local proposed scheme, I think.
But it comes through the constituency, so quite a bit of it will be.
It could be more.
So it could be more, but at the moment, but the thing is,
where it's going.
But the thing is that what's important is that, I mean, I am an MP, I'm not a government minister. So I can talk to people, I can raise it in Parliament and parliamentary questions, I can say Prime Minister's questions, I can say I do, and I can spread it around, and you can, and if you want to come up to Parliament, I can welcome you into Parliament, so you might meet people, like, there's all sorts of things we can do, but at the present stage, the best thing I can do is just bring it up in the House of Commons itself, and try and do it that way. This is very, very early stages. I'm sorry to say this, but I came here just to see what was going on. I didn't come here with any plans whatsoever to answer any questions like this at all. So I cannot say to you right now, this is what I'll do, because I'll be making up, I've got no idea what I'm going to do.
I apologise, we're a bit frustrated with politicians, the way they sort of they're promising the opposition and they don't.
I mean, if I promised you, if I promised you I'd do this, that and the other and then didn't do it, what would you think about me?
Can we come back to...
Seems sincere.
So I'm finding it difficult to hear you. It's probably because of my old age. Oh yes. Well, as I said to, sorry, I forgot your name. I do know you actually. I've met you before, Karen. I did say, I talked to Caroline that I'm certainly happy to talk to Julie Lewis about this. And just see where we are. I may find, if I go up to Parliament, there's a large number. I mean, the West Midlands group here, have you had any communications about this through any of your MPs? Have you had any response at all? It's an APPG, I think.
Yeah, I've been in contact with Earl Baldwin quite a lot.
but my local MPs are not keen to get involved, including Geoffrey Robinson. I think he can't get involved because he has to keep a low profile.
Could I just ask a quick question to the girl against fluoride?
Yeah.
We need some legal help here. I've asked a few barristers, some friends here, proposed solicitors. We're not getting anywhere. Is there any kind of assistance? It seems the barristers in Ireland have a bigger heart, yeah? Could you give us any guide on how we could get some help on this?
You see, what I did was I basically just put it out there that I wanted to take this case.
They came to us because
they came to us
because it's so much means so much professionally for them if they win this case. So you have to basically make it look like this is going to be something massive for them professionally if they win. I'm sure these people that are helping us want something professionally, and of course I'm sure they've got, you know.
I don't know if you want to strip off at Southampton Airport.
Yeah, but no, it really is just a matter. I mean, for me, I didn't have follow any particular strategy to get the legal team. It was just a matter of putting it out there and doing the different stunts. And then I was giving public talks in different counties, and a man just came up to me and he said one of his friends was a solicitor who specialised in environmental law, that he would be quite interested. So we met with him, and then he agreed to take the case. And then barristers, we've just they've basically some have approached us, and others just through people that we know who are very sound, ethical people that are very, you know, willing to take this on, and they're putting up, like one of the barristers is taking off a huge amount of work just because he wants to put his time into this case.
Would you work for us, do you think? Would you come over
Irish law, you see, they wouldn't be able to practice.
I think they wouldn't, and I think that there's one other thing that's quite important as well to note. Even though I did say that we are trying to raise funds at the moment to pay for expert witnesses, but under the Aarhus Convention, which is under EU law, that if there is no financial gain for Aisling, therefore she does not have to pay costs if she loses. So I think that same principle will probably work in.
Yeah, there is protection now for taking this case.
Otherwise, she would have had to pay.
Because they did inform me that if the case was to lose, that I could be liable for up to 250,000 costs against me, and I said I'm willing to go. I'll take that risk because I'm very passionate. I don't care. I don't live by money anyway. You know, it's not something that drives me. But luckily, this convention anyway, which will cover Europe, that if somebody was to take this case, that even if they weren't successful, that costs cannot be awarded against them because it's taken in a matter of public protection and for public health.
It'd be interesting to see how that works.
Just in the back.
Yes, two things. Firstly, God bless you.
God bless you.
From my heart, it just.
Thank you.
No, take a bow.
How are you?
Did you say that fluoride is classified as a medicine?
Yeah.
Do you have that?
You have that,
yes. In 2005, European Court of Justice. I do have it somewhere in my suitcase, which is not with me, but yeah, I will pass it.
It's classified as a food substance.
Okay.
It's not classified as anything.
The Irish won't classify it as anything.
Yeah, our Irish Medicines Board is very unusual because they have this in the water. Last year we corresponded with them and they were classifying it as a cosmetic. And they cosmetic. So that was their reason, their rationale for not actually having to test it.
Is all those details on your website?
So if I'll give you my details anyway, and I'll send them through.
On the website, so you get it off there.
Your barrister uses consent because that's.
Oh yeah.
Science. It's just consent.
Yeah.
Consent.
Yeah. Massive.
The barrister will try and twist it to make it complicated.
I know.
There is an important thing here. Is it does fall between the stools. It's not classified as a food. It's not classified as a medicine.
Yeah.
So there's no legislation that covers it. So therefore they feel they can feed it to us without testing it and not doing anything, and just giving us toxic waste without having to abide by anything. They need to include all sorts of nasties with it when they put it in the water, like arsenic.
It's not licensed for human consumption.
It's not licensed for everything.
So whatever stool it falls under or doesn't,
it doesn't fall under
make a
anything.
difference. It's got
Well,
to be
if it falls
licensed.
under a medicine, they have to have consent. They have to.
That's right. They have to test it. That's the point. We try to get the MHRA to say that it should be classed as a medicine so that it will be tested, and because for human consumption, and they refuse to do it basically because it's government policy to put it in, and they know if they test it, it will fail. It will fail.
Exactly.
I think you have a really, really good case there. And I work as a registered nurse in primary care, and if a patient needs a paracetamol, I can't give them a paracetamol tablet unless I obtain their consent. So,
Yeah, it's basic principles of
I think it's an historical situation that's happened here, and I think it probably comes from, I don't want to sound political, it probably comes from an idea when people thought the state knew best. And there was a period of time when everyone was actually quite willing to submit to that idea, and it's taken a while to come back away from that. And it's also like the idea when you went to the doctor said something, you never questioned it. You never went for a second opinion because doctor knew best. And it's that sort of thing. I think it comes from that period of time. And in Ireland you even had, the idea that, a very strong idea that the state and the church knew best.
Yeah, big time,
and even stronger than here. So I think we've come away from that, and I think that's what we're seeing more and more, is people are saying the state doesn't know best, which is a fantastic thing.
If you went to your GP for a non-fluoride treatment, some kind of medication, he said he'd put it into your community's drinking water for the next month, what would you think?
Well, exactly, to be wrong. Yeah,
It's the same thing.
But it's that sort of thing. I think it's sort of come to the idea, and I think we've moved away, thank heavens, from the idea that we aren't responsible for ourselves. You still get a few people who say, "Oh, the state, why do I have to do it? That someone else should do it." But we've now got back to the idea that perhaps we're responsible for ourselves, which I think is a very healthy thing.
The legislation's got to go.
I think one of the key things is that I think this was decided on 50 years ago when we didn't know that all of the details, all the research wasn't there, and it's a political decision, and we have to get the politicians to change, and that means we have to do something. If we don't do anything about it, the people here don't do anything about it, it will happen.
Yeah.
So we have to stop it, we have to do something.
It really is developing a relationship between ourselves and the representatives.
The other question I'd like to ask before I go, and I have to go in a second, run around me, it's so important. Is there anything else besides fluoride? I don't mean they used to genuinely clean it, obviously. Is there anything else actually added to water besides fluoride, generally speaking?
Well, it's not for it's added for water for cleaning, but nothing else is added for medicinal reason for actually trying to change the health. There's nothing.
This question is when the water comes through my tap
at the moment. It's not going in to clean the water.
When I turn on my tap at home, and because it's not fluoridated at the moment, it's anything in there that wouldn't be in there that couldn't get in there through perfectly natural, normal means.
But only for making the water safe to drink.
They put chemicals in to make the water safe, supposedly.
And how many of them remain in there once they get to my tap?
Quite a few. You will have chlorine in there, and you'll have.
You might get a high dose of chlorine because further down the line there might be a break in the pipe.
Oh yeah, but that's not deliberate.
No,
fluoride's deliberate.
Fluoride is added to the water to treat the person.
Yeah, anything added to water that's not for the water.
Just sort of check on that before I start making fuss. Someone comes back and says, "Hold on a minute, you're not objecting to that, not objecting to this. Why would you object to that? That's not consistent." So I've got to be careful. Perhaps if you were able to.
You've got your water with an EDM and no, I'm wrong. Okay.
So perhaps if you can send me some.
We're getting to the last till 4 o'clock when we say we're finished. Any last questions? Any questions anyone's got?
You can filter the chemicals out as well.
And also Aileen and Shane for coming across, and it's been really good to have them here. And just when you leave here, don't stop doing things. Help us to stop this fluoride in the water.
And if any of you are on Facebook, go on to the Girl Against Fluoride and give us a like. People like to see the numbers going up.
Guidance to the act. So arrangements of practice, contract. Someone doesn't have a contract. Nothing appointments of an agent as well. Very terminated.
Unless they're saying because they started.
Excuse me, are you putting that on the internet at all?
Yes, it will.
Yeah, good. Okay.